Welcome back, MTG Joe here, and we're here for another installment of Weekly Meta Breakdown. Basically, we go through the top performing decks for each format on MTG Arena, and the data is coming from Untapped.gg, which is a companion tool that runs alongside MTG Arena. It's free to use, how it tracks your win percentages, and then it aggregates all the user data into kind of statistics in terms of win rates, based on number of matches, duration. It syncs your collection so it can suggest decks for you to build. Really useful tool. You can download it for free in the link in the video description down below. This particular video will be on Standard. It is the first look at Standard post bans, so post Alrund's Epiphany, Faceless Haven, and Divide by Zero. So based on Untapped, we'll put the deck list in the video description down below. One thing to note is really it's only been like 3 or 4 days, so it's hard to aggregate a large sum of data. So best of one, we do have Untapped data. For this week in particular, we're going to be using a PTQ qualifier as kind of a sample size for best of 3. It was about a 256 person tournament, high competition, so people are playing for like high stakes to get into a Pro Tour qualifier. Or to get into the Pro Tour, if you win, you can qualify for that. So we're going to start off with best of 1, as always. So like I said, this is for Standard. There'll be separate videos that'll come out tomorrow for Historic and Alchemy, with the new changes as well. We do this once a week. If you do enjoy this type of content, make sure to subscribe to the channel to get your weekly installments on this. We also do a lot of gameplay content on the channel. So if you're looking for that as well, as always, it's really appreciated if you can. Drop a like, comment, and subscribe. So enough shilling. Let's look. So this is January 27th to January 30th. So really only a 3-day window. Like I said, we normally do a week here. We're looking at Standard best of 1, Platinum to Mythic rank, and we're looking at about 50,000 games played. So good size for this kind of sample. The top performing deck, and what we'll kind of see is the theme of Orzhov-based control decks, mid-range decks, but really the core of these decks are their Meathook Massacre, Vanishing Verse, Edgar. You have some combination of like Shambling Ghast, Deadly Dispute kind of thing. So Lolth, kind of the Blood on the Snow package. Some aren't playing Blood on the Snow, which we'll see in the best of 3 results. But really the kind of this core. You're seeing a lot of these decks playing Wedding Announcement now, recurable token generation that leaves you an Anthem. There's a lot of good cards in this. Vanishing Verse hitting all the monocolored decks is very effective, hitting Goldspan Dragon, just 2 mana answer for pretty much all the threats in the format, with like minus Edgar kind of. Vanishing Verse was weak against Faceless Haven. That doesn't exist anymore, so all the creature lands it hit. So there's a lot of utility in the Vanishing Verse right now. We're also seeing a lot of these lists now opt to play some numbers of Rite of Oblivion. Another useful card, you have a lot of sack fodder, whether it be treasures, like little tokens, stuff like that. Sack it, exile any permanent. It's really good in the Blood and the Snow mirrors because it's an exile effect as well. This version is playing more creature heavy with the learn package of Professor of Symbology as well as Lolth as a Fora. Some of the mono black versions will play Professor Onyx. So just kind of on the edge kind of cases. Sculptor Merchant versus Spellstinger is another kind of consideration. Honestly, I do prefer in these decks the Merchant. A 1/4 body blocks better, while the Fellstinger can kind of trade up. The 1/4 can repeatedly block, but also it's just a repeatable way to draw cards without loss of life. And then like the Edgar's flip, just a sticky threat. Not many Prismari commands being played at the moment, so it's usually pretty good value here. Notably, we're only seeing 1 Mascot Exhibition, and they're going 2 reduced to memories in this particular build. I generally like the Mascot Exhibitions, especially with so many learn targets. The games go long. Just casting a 7 mana, get 3 bodies seems good over and over. Next, we see Mono Green Aggro. Chariot's not nerfed in this format, and it is a hell of a drug. Really, what we just want to look at with these decks is kind of a couple access points. How much 2 mana acceleration are they doing? Are they playing Ren in 7? And what are they opting for in the 4-drop slot? So this particular version is only playing 2 Sculptor of Winters. Sometimes you'll see 4. Sometimes you'll also see Lotus Cobra or Tanglefloor Hedron. Just 2 Sculptors. The curve's a little bit lower on this particular one. We have the 1-drop and Ascendant Packleader. Only playing 2 of the Ulvenwald Oddities. This card's always impressed in mono green. I'm surprised to see only 2, but with Chariot you are competing with that. This version is opting in best of 1 to be fight heavier. So you're always going to see the 4 Blizzard Brawl. The number that fluctuates is the Inscription of Abundance. This version is opting to go with 3 of these. Some other cards you'll see in the 3-drop slot: Briarbrack Tracker, Cemetery Reaper at times. This version is just going with Tried and True. You got the Kazandus, you got the Old Growths, and then your 4 Rangers class. Without Divide by Zero, this card becomes a lot better, because what was always kind of sucked was, you spend all this mana pumping up your Rangers class, and they're just like, 3 mana, set it back to your hand. And then 1 Unnatural Growth is just kind of the creature mirror. Kind of a blessing in disguise. Without the Faceless Havens, your mana gets a lot better, because, double green, triple green. There's a lot of times you have 2 lands, maybe 3 lands, but you can't cast on card because of the Faceless. Opting for the full forfeit. Lair of the Hydra, and really this deck's playing 28 lands, so you shouldn't really have to worry about mulliganing too often to find lands in this deck. We see our first installment of mono white aggro. Again, there's a lot of kind of pivot points in terms of what's going to deviate between these aggro lists, or like the cards in particular. There's always the core, so you're always going to have kind of your Usher of the Fallen, Luminarch Aspirant, some number of Adeline, some number of Thalia, and then really kind of the pivot points are how many Brutal Cathars, how many Skyclave Apparitions. Some lists play 3/3, some play 4/2, some play just 4. It really depends on what kind of your threats are. Elite Spellbinder. When we're playing into more of a Blood on the Snow meta, then this card becomes a lot better, taxing their sweepers, their meat hooks, stuff like that. When you're playing against more like mono green, this card loses some of its utility, or even it's okay in the mono white mirrors, just because it does go over the top in terms of being a flyer, but still just the 1 toughness often trades pretty poorly in terms of combat. You'll see some exile versions of the deck that play Stonebinder Familiar as a 1-drop. This Hopeful Initiate kind of scales up without having the condition of being just kind of a mopey 1-drop at times. Training is probably easier to trigger just with the combination of pumps from like Luminarch Aspirant as well as Intrepid Adversary to kind of have different kind of attack powers. This also lets you blow up enchantments or artifacts, so Meat Hook at times, even once it's cast, the Drain of Life can impact you. Wedding Announcement, Esika's Chariot, Rangers class, all these kind of cards in this regard. Solstice if needed. And then we're just kind of scaling up. We have the Adeline, some copies of Redain, also very good. We get versus the Blood on the Snow, which we see as being the top deck right now, and then 1 copy of Legion Angel. So there's a ton of good 3-drops you can play in mono white. Something like the fact like Welcoming Vampire, which in theory in a white aggressive deck, just draw cards, doesn't see no play. Maul the Skyclave, very good in the mono white mirrors, in the creature mirrors, just to give you kind of haste first strike, especially with a vigilant creature like Adeline, sees next to no play. And then we're seeing some copies of Portable Hole. I would say overall, mono white takes more of a hit without Faceless Haven than the mono green deck. This is a lot easier to activate at various points, and mono green tends to get ahead more on mana, I find. You're also playing more lands. This being effectively 6 mana in a white aggressive deck that's only playing 23 lands, this is going to be a lot harder to activate. So we're going to see kind of a reduction in the effectiveness of this particular card. Also, this just being able to scale to varied amounts of mana is also more useful than this always just being a 3/4. We see Selesnya Humans, kind of a lot of the familiarities of the mono white deck, but what you're getting is Catilda, which can help you ramp up, but also put counters late game. You have just more copies of Adeline. Hamlet Vanguard could get very large in this deck, potentially turn 3, 5/5 with Ward, which plays pretty well. You have the Torrens, which lets you go really wide with the deck, and then some copies of Sigarda for card advantage, as well as an Anthem effect. Notably with this version here, you're a lot more susceptible to board wipes. You don't have the tax effects. Also, there's less interaction in this deck, so this one's more about trying to kill your opponent. So if we look at this version here, you have 5, 7 points of interaction in terms of just exiling stuff that sticks to the board. You also have a way to tax, and then a way to tax here, along with Thalias. Here you really only have the Thalias to tax. So you're kind of walking more into a board wipe, but in just terms of sheer power, like a turn 3 5/5 is going to be unmatched compared to these things. Torrens does let you spur out and go wider, but you're a little weaker. Really, you're just playing the Brutal Cathars, and then Kabira Takedown is a removal spell, but it's contingent on you having a board state. So kind of just like the edge cases. I haven't played too much of this deck. I've played a lot of mono white aggro over Standard's lifetime. It's my preferred aggro over mono green, just personal preference wise. We see mono white again. This version, only the lands are different. 320, 221 in terms of the lands. There's really no reason to play snow lands now in the deck. It actually just makes you worse in the mirror. So you could just cut these snow lands, I would say. There's no utility in them. It's just downside, unless you really just want to play your full art snow basics. But it looks pretty much identical. Another mono white aggro. So this is the Stonebinder familiar version. Just fewer Skyclaves. You're just playing more low to the ground in this particular version. No creature lands does seem wrong. I would play like the two. Orzhov Control. This is just another version. So this one you have like the farm hand to ramp you up. Some Sorens. And just kind of a split of Planeswalkers. Going all in on the wedding announcement. 4 of Deadly Dispute seems great. Just fewer Vanishing Verse. I think I still prefer the swap in this. This is still reliant. So a couple things. One, this is reliant on you having something on board to sack. While a very good card in this particular deck, you're still not getting as much utility as just Vanishing Verse 2 mana. Also instant speed, targeted gold span when it attacks, as opposed to, or like before combat. You still give them a treasure, but they don't get 2 treasures kind of thing. We see Clerics, not as good as in Alchemy. Just you don't get those added buffed Clerics, but like getting kind of synergies with the deck. Really just trying with Markov Purifier to draw some cards. You got Vanishing Verse. This version, really, you're just looking, are they umpires? Are they not umpires? This doesn't even seem like the most refined because we're still seeing Shine Shadow Snarl. You should be playing the slow land. The Snarls are freaking awful. Don't play Snarls. And then we just see like another mono green. This is what's kind of alluding to, like this version here. We have 6 accelerants on 2. A little bit higher on the Ulvenwald. This one does have protection in Snakeskin Veil, but we see like this version here, no inscriptions, no Rangers class. It looks like the other version of mono green. A couple percentage points better, closer to 60%. I do think the more interaction version plays a little bit better. The only thing I would kind of test to see is I really like this card in mono green. It's just such a beating, especially against like the control decks. And then it's a mana sink late. A deck I haven't personally played. I played the mono black version, but we see a Dimir zombies. Really, Dimir is giving you access to Necro Duality. And one thing kind of cool, just to kind of demo untapped, you can see if I want to play this particular deck, I need 2 rare wild cards, 3 mythics. I have everything else to craft. But this particular deck here, you kind of just Necro Duality copy. You have Overcharge Amalgam as a counter spell. Headless Horseman kind of gives you board wipe insurance, as well as Archghoul of Thraben. Just another ways to attack. The Geralf gives you flying for your zombies, and then you have a way to kind of buff your team with Blade Stitch Scab. You have some removal. Like, this is one of the best cards in zombies, I would imagine. Just good mana sink, so I'm surprised you see this. Like, only 2 of these, and this isn't that good. You're not exploiting too much in this deck to really get like huge value. I'd rather just always have this as a kicker, even just as a 2/3 death touch. If we look into a lot of the popular decks, like mono green, stuff like that, this just trades really well. Even against mono white, a lot of their creatures are 2 power, just attacking into a 2/3 body. Another version of Blood on the Snow. Again, we're just seeing like minor edge cases. I think the other version was on 3. This is 4. Naya Humans. Like, usually what happens is the first week, we're only 3 days of data. It doesn't really settle. Naya Humans is really a mono white humans deck, but we're getting some utility in like Helana and Elena, just to buff your team, Snakeskin Veil for protection, and Showdown of the Skulls. The Valor Stance is actually pretty interesting. It gives you some utility in a couple different cases. It's removal against like mono green or other big stuff, board wipe insurance as well. So some copies of this hitting Goldspan Dragon, also very good. And we're actually not seeing really any Goldspan Dragons in the best of one. just another take, just slight variations. Another mono white aggro deck. We see Gruul Werewolves. This is pretty stock in this regard. It's been played at this point. You're playing the Snow Mana for the Frostbites and Snakeskin Veil, or for the Blizzard Brawls. Just some interaction. Really, kind of the limiting factor in this format is just your interaction's pretty bad for best of one, and you don't get Rahilda, which is very good, as well as Ferocious Pup in the Alchemy version. Just much better 1-drops and 2-drops in that particular shell. Is it control? I said we didn't see a gold span. We found it. I actually don't mind this configuration. What I would probably say is I think 3 Hellbreaker Horrors is a little much for a control deck, especially just when we're looking at what some of the top performing decks are. What we would likely see is I would probably a Cinderclasm or just a 3-mana, one of the deal 2 kind of themed ones. The Demon Bolts, I really like Burn Down the House, just a very effective spell there. One thing, so no Galvanic iteration in these ones. The 4 Fading Hope does seem good. We're not seeing any other bounce spells out of it. I think some copies of the Sock Coming isn't bad in this shell. I don't think you could go Disdainful Stroke in this format in best of 1 at least, but in best of 3, Disdainful Stroke does have a lot of utility in these mirrors. I would probably cut one of these, play another one of these, and then the Abrades are fine, but I'd probably cut one and then go just a Cinderclasm. I think the 3 Sweepers is probably enough for the format. This is just good because even against the aggro or like a control mirrors, you just cast it as a get 3/3s. Mono white, mono black, like I said, just Blood on the Snow. This one's playing Toxrill. We're seeing the win rates a lot lower. Just Vanishing Verse is so much better than a lot of these cards. See Azoria's Control. I think this was a CGB one. Really just, I don't think you could, without Divide by Zero, it makes it a little bit harder for these kind of blue decks, but a lot of the interaction just doesn't line up super well. I think the version that would play better is Devastating Mastery, just being able to hit Planeswalkers, kind of all that stuff in one. Now we're kind of into the dumpster realm, so the deck particularly that I've enjoyed the most playing in Standard, I've only played like 3 games, but we won every one. I've been playing a lot of Storm the Festival decks. This particular configuration felt the best. I've been hovering around top 1200 Mythic with just various kind of Storm the Festival builds. The big thing with us holding back Storm the Festival was Divide by Zero and just all the blue-based decks. Kind of seeing those move to the wayside. In the Blood on the Snow mirrors, they get the recursion of Blood on the Snow. You get kind of the acceleration and just throwing down a couple multiple big fatties. Ran 7 and Chariot, just kind of revisiting that shell has felt really good. Just copying the tokens, Chariot. This version here is kind of a tokens version. So you have Innkeeper to gain you life, you have Wedding Announcement, Felidar Retreat, Chariot, Edgar, Lolth. So kind of all these tokens, multiple value spells. Vanishing Verse very good in this deck as well. Then you have your Meathooks as kind of your catch-up mechanic. So 7 kind of points of removal, and then just a lot of like must-answer threats. We played a Simic version that like ramped up to some of the big werewolves. It got more mana down, but it was harder to interact with the board against like hyper-aggressive decks if we're seeing a lot of mono white come out. Just having access to Meathooks a lot better. I think the Simic version is probably better suited as Sultai. But I've really enjoyed this deck. I'll post this link. There's a YouTube video for it if you want to check it out as well. And then finally for best of 3. So this was the $1,000 cash GG Tour MTG Arena Cup #1 set championship qualifier. $5 to enter. 245 players. So pretty much a full cap, which is pretty awesome. So we're going to look quickly at the bottom here. So in terms of distribution, if we look at the top performing decks from a win rate percentage, ignoring kind of outliers, 1%, 2. So Orzhov decks played very well. If we're just grouping like Orzhov in general, the tempo decks are just another name for these kind of sack fights decks. All in like the 60% range. I actually don't like this view that much. Sorry. It's always kind of misleading with these arrows. So like Orzhov Snow, 60%. We have like the Orzhov mid-range, which we'll take a look. It's more creature-oriented. It's more of a mid-range, less sweeper kind of effect. Temur Treasures is basically like Magda, Jaspara, Goldspan Dragon, and then some combination. It's a red-green aggro-based deck. Some play the 4-mana dragon that draws you cards. Some are on Stormseeker. Just kind of tweaked variations, Chariot kind of decks with blue-based counterspells for kind of the more controlling mirrors. Esper Control did terrible. Izzet Control about 50%, not too bad into like an unknown meta. Jund Treasure is just not doing as well. These are usually the Akalian kind of ramp up style decks. Mono green aggro 50%. Mono white just got dumpstered. Mono white doesn't play too well into all the black based removal, I would say. It's easier to manage, especially just Meathook. It's harder to Meathook the mono green deck than it is the mono white deck. Just a lot of 1 and 2 toughness versus 3 to 4 toughness. Dimir Control. So like Control did really bad. So if you're a blue mage, was not the weekend for you. Naya Humans, kind of now we're just into the small sample size, but got some of the top decks. I'll link this tournament as well. So if you want to get a feel for that, we'll have that in the link. But like Orzhov mid-range that won it. This was actually a pretty sweet deck that I want to try out. But it's like Sorin, Lolth, Valky in there. Some splash for red, just the flip side of Valky. But Luminarch Aspirant, Henrika, Edgar. Kind of just a lot of 2-ofs, just grindy value. Meathook, Wedding Announcement. Looks like a solid deck overall. See, Izzet Control, Hullbreaker deck, kind of all in. See Dragons, Goldspan, Hullbreaker, Smoldering Egg. So a couple good Izzet performant decks in best of 3. I think in best of 3 it's a little bit easier to configure than best of 1. Selesnya Ramp, which is a Storm the Festival deck. Yes, only 1 actually. So it's just kind of a big mana. 4 Starheim Unleash, kind of sweet in that deck. Felidar Retreat, Wedding Announcement, kind of going from that angle. We do see an Azorius Control. Witness the Future. Yeah, so Devastating Mastery. This card's a lot better in these particular decks. You want to hit all their permanents. There's a lot of like random like Planeswalkers now. We're seeing the return of Ren, the stuff like that. Chariots. Orzhov Control. These are just Blood on the Snow piles. So just kind of slightly different configuration, but the core of what they're trying to do is the same. Actually, is this one? This one's probably more mid-rangey. Do we see the Blood on the Snow? No, it doesn't look like they're Blood on the Snow, but kind of that. This was one from Crows, just like a Boros aggro deck that looked pretty sweet. I was watching some of his run. Showdown of the Skulls kind of refills your hand in these mirrors, in like the kind of sweeper heavy decks. Here's an example. Temur Treasures. So this one's like Jaspara, Magda, Goldspan, Innkeeper, Stormseeker, Moonveil, Werewolf Packleader, Chariot, Ranger's Class. And then you have the blue counter spells on the side, Disdainful Stroke, Negates for the heavy sweeper decks. Slightly different mid-range version. Briarbrack, just kind of more in. Some main board counters, 4 Chariots, 4 Class. So kind of like choose your own adventure. But the big thing I think we want to take away from this, Bardu mid-range, Valky, Immersturm Predator, Florian. So kind of sweet. I think the big kind of takeaway, and you can go through, curate these lists to see if there's any that jump out to you. Actually, I want to see Dimir Control. Sedgemoor, Lair, Immerth. So more of a mid-range version, but still, are they on Meathook? Yeah, 3 Meathook. Interesting nonetheless. Just kind of these versions of the deck. A big thing to me is just the return to mid-range, which has actually really been pleasant. All my games, for the most part, there's been a couple control decks we've played against, but there's been a lot of decision-making in terms of attacking, blocking, removal mattering. And it's just kind of refreshing. There's nothing that's been too, like turns didn't always win, but the thing is, like, there's a point in the game where they would just get to where they're just like, I'm just going to take 4 turns in a row and you die. Doesn't matter what you did up to this point. Do you have a counterspell? No. Even if you have a counterspell, I'm going to still take an extra turn. Which always kind of felt bad. Or like a divide by 0 just time walking you for the turn. Or, you throw all your... There's still Fading Hope, but it's just not as big of a deal. Like, it still feels bad to throw an Edgar down and then 1 mana answer it. Or kind of your big threats. But, being able to kind of get value out of Lolth, Ren, self-milling, playing 6 mana Storm the Festival as like a big Coco, stuff like that. It's felt really good. But let me know what you think in the comments, what decks you've been enjoying, what you think of New Standard. We'll come back for the full week next week, and we'll kind of go through that. But that's pretty much it for the week. As always, if you can, drop a like, comment, and subscribe. And good luck to those trying to finish top 1200 for the month. I'm like 1248 or something, so I'll probably play a game or two, see if we could sneak in for the qualification. But anyways, stay safe out there. Hope you have a great one, and thanks for watching.